Don't you have anyone to spend Christmas with? Her voice trembled slightly as she placed her hand on the cold table. The old man simply shook his head, his gaze fixed on the small artificial tree in the center of the empty diner. She pushed a slice of cake toward him. Then may I be the first one tonight? He studied her face for a long moment, then leaned forward and whispered 7 words. 3 days later, she received a call from Washington and nothing would ever be the same. Welcome to QH. Let's uncover what really happened. Leah Carson, 24, worked part-time as a waitress at a small diner in rural Idaho. She lived with her mother in a modest apartment, still recovering from her father's unexpected passing earlier that year. On Christmas Eve, the diner was nearly empty. Most regulars had gone home to their families, leaving only a handful of solitary figures seeking warmth and companionship in mugs of coffee and slices of holiday pie. Just before closing time, when the staff was already wiping down counters and tallying receipts, the bell above the door chimed. An elderly man stepped in from the snowy night, wearing a thin jacket, worn-out shoes, his long silver hair hanging past his collar. No one paid him much attention. "We're closing in 15, the manager called out without looking up, his tone suggesting he'd prefer not to serve anyone at all. Leah hesitated, then stepped forward. "I'll take care of him, Frank. It's Christmas Eve." The manager sighed, but nodded reluctantly. Leah guided the old man to a window booth where colored lights from neighboring shops cast a gentle glow across the table. "What can I get you, sir?" she asked. "Notepad ready, just some soup if you have it," he replied, his voice a soft rasp that suggested he didn't use it often, "and maybe some water." Leah disappeared into the kitchen, returning with a steaming bowl of potato soup, larger than the standard portion, and the last gingerbread cookie from the display case, decorated with red and green icing. "I added the cookie," she explained, setting it beside the soup. "No one should go without something sweet on Christmas Eve." The man's weathered hands curved around the warm bowl. "This is very kind of you. I don't have much to give," Leah admitted, "but letting someone go hungry on Christmas, that just wouldn't be right." He ate slowly, methodically, savoring each spoonful as if it were a rare delicacy. His eyes, cloudy with age, but somehow still penetrating, occasionally glanced around the diner, taking in details most would miss. When Leah returned to clear his empty dishes, the old man looked up at her with an intensity that made her pause. "You know," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "you look just like someone who once saved my life." Leah blinked in surprise. "I'm sorry." The old man leaned closer, and in a voice only she could hear, whispered 7 words. "You are your father's daughter in every way." A chill ran through Leah's body. Her father had died just 10 months ago, a quiet, humble man who rarely spoke of his military service. How could this stranger know anything about him, about her? Before she could ask, the man stood, placed a carefully folded $5 bill on the table, far more than his meal had cost, and nodded once in gratitude. "Merry Christmas, Leah Carson," he said, then turned toward the door. "If you believe a good person deserves to be remembered, stay here with us." Leah stood frozen, watching as the old man stepped out into the gently falling snow. How did he know her full name? She hadn't worn her name tag tonight, and she certainly hadn't introduced herself. She rushed to the door, but by the time she pushed it open, the man had vanished into the night. Only footprints in the fresh snow proved he had been there at all. When she returned to clear the table, she discovered a small folded note beneath the bill. "Thank you for doing the right thing. Some debts take a lifetime to repay." That night, as she helped her mother decorate their small Christmas tree, Leah mentioned the strange encounter. "He knew my name, Mom, and he said I look like someone who saved his life." She paused, remembering. "He said, I'm my father's daughter in every way." Her mother's hand stilled, a glass ornament suspended mid-air. "What did he look like?" Leah described the silver hair, the weathered face, the penetrating eyes that seemed to hold decades of stories. "And how old would you say he was?" "Late 70s, maybe early 80s. Her mother sat down slowly, the color draining from her face. "Leah, that description matches perfectly with how your father always described his commanding officer from his time in Germany. But your father rarely talked about his service, said it was classified. No one really knew what he did there." 3 days after Christmas, while Leah was working the morning shift, a man in a dark suit entered the diner. He scanned the room with practiced efficiency before approaching her. "Leah Carson?" he asked, his voice low and professional. "My name is Graham Rowe. I represent the Veterans Affairs Special Recognition Division. Might I have a word with you privately?" In the diner's empty back room, Mercer produced a worn photograph, protected in a plastic sleeve. It showed a young American medic dragging a wounded soldier through what appeared to be a forest clearing. Both men were splattered with mud, and worse, the medic wore a distinctive red hat beneath his helmet. This photo was taken in 1972, near the East German border, Mercer explained. The medic pulling his wounded comrade to safety is Private Martin Carson, your father. Leah touched the image with trembling fingers. She had never seen this photo, never known this part of her quiet father's life. The man being rescued, Mercer continued, was Colonel Everett Mason, one of our most valuable intelligence officers during the Cold War. After his recovery, he led several crucial operations before mysteriously disappearing shortly after his retirement. The official record lists him as missing, presumed deceased. Leah's heart raced as connections formed. The man at the diner was Colonel Mason? Mercer nodded. We believe so. He's been living off the grid for decades for reasons that remain classified, but facial recognition from your diner's security camera confirms it's him. The first confirmed sighting in nearly 30 years. But why would he come to see me? Why now? Colonel Mason apparently made a vow after your father saved him. He swore that he would always watch over the Carson family, would return the life debt somehow. Mercer paused. We believe he's been monitoring your family from a distance for many years, waiting for the right moment. Leah remembered something her mother had mentioned after her father's death, how an anonymous benefactor had paid for her father's medical bills during his final illness, how scholarship offers had mysteriously appeared for Leah at exactly the right moment. When he learned of your father's passing, Mercer continued, we believe he decided to make one final appearance, to pass the torch of gratitude directly to you. Leah felt her world shifting beneath her feet. The kind gesture she had offered a lonely old man on Christmas Eve hadn't been a random act of charity. It had been the culmination of a promise made decades before she was born, a circle of kindness finally completing itself. Type yes if you've ever believed that kindness returns, slow but never lost. 3 days later, Leah found herself being escorted through the security checkpoints of a military installation she hadn't even known existed in her state. The concrete buildings looked mundane from the outside, deliberately unremarkable, but the security measures and the deference shown to Mercer suggested this was no ordinary facility. In a windowless conference room, a uniformed officer with silver eagles on his shoulders greeted her. Carson, I'm Colonel Stuart Langley. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. His handshake was firm but brief. What I'm about to share with you is classified, but given the circumstances, we've received special clearance. He activated a wall screen showing a map of Cold War-era Germany, with several locations marked in red. Your father wasn't just a medic, Ms. Carson. He was attached to a highly specialized reconnaissance unit, operating along the Iron Curtain. The night captured in that photograph, when he rescued Colonel Mason, was during an operation that prevented a potential nuclear escalation. The details remain sealed, but the outcome shaped history. Leah tried to reconcile this information with the quiet man who had taught her to fish and helped with her math homework. He never mentioned any of this. He wouldn't have. Langley confirmed. Those operations required absolute secrecy, even decades later. What we can tell you is that Colonel Mason made a vow that night, as your father carried him through hostile territory with 3 bullet wounds in his own leg. Langley slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents showing regular deposits to a trust fund in Leah's name, small college scholarships she had received, even the random insurance policy that had covered her father's final medical expenses. Colonel Mason promised to watch over your father's family by any means necessary. He's been fulfilling that promise silently for decades. Leah's hand trembled as she turned pages documenting a lifetime of subtle protection she'd never known existed. After learning of your father's passing, Mason apparently decided to make a final personal connection. Langley's voice softened slightly. He wanted to see Martin Carson's daughter face to face to confirm that his debt had been properly honored. But why appear as a homeless man? Why not just introduce himself? Mason has enemies even now. His tradecraft, appearing unremarkable, testing situations before revealing himself became second nature decades ago. A junior officer entered whispering something to Langley, who nodded gravely. Miss Carson, there's someone who would like to speak with you. He activated a screen on the wall. The face that appeared was older than she remembered from Christmas Eve, more formally dressed, but unmistakably the same man she had served soup. Leah, he said, his voice stronger now, more commanding. I apologize for the theatrics at the diner. Old habits die hard. Colonel Mason, she managed to reply. Your father saved more than just my life that night in '72. Mason continued. The intelligence I carried prevented a military miscalculation that could have triggered open conflict. Millions of lives, Ms. Carson. That's what your father protected. He never received public recognition because the mission remained classified. Mason's eyes, the same penetrating gaze she remembered, seemed to look through the camera directly into her soul. When I saw you offer food to what appeared to be a homeless old man on Christmas Eve, without hesitation or judgment, I knew immediately the same quiet courage, the same instinctive humanity. Martin Carson's legacy lives on perfectly in his daughter. Leah couldn't stop the tears that spilled down her cheeks. There's one more thing, Mason added. The trust fund established for you has matured. It will cover any education you wish to pursue, any path you choose. Your father once mentioned you wanted to become a doctor. That option is now available to you. Military personnel allowed Leah privacy to absorb this information. When she emerged from the conference room hours later, she carried her father's service medal, posthumously awarded, and delivered personally by Mason's representative, and a letter outlining the educational fund established in her name. The media never learned the full story, but within military circles, a secure video began circulating. Night footage from the diner security camera showing the elderly Mason bowing his head before a small photo of Martin Carson that Leah kept in her wallet. The timestamp showed 11 Christmas Eve. A week later, the Veterans Support Foundation contacted Leah about becoming an ambassador for their winter relief programs. The position came with a stipend and flexible hours that would accommodate her new medical school application. The following spring, Leah received a package containing her father's red medic cap, the same one from the 1972 photograph, with a simple note. From one Carson to another, the legacy continued. When Leah returned to the diner, it wasn't as a waitress, but as the sponsor of their new annual tradition, a free Christmas Eve dinner for veterans and anyone spending the holiday alone. Have you ever made the right choice when everyone else walked away? Your story matters too. The next Christmas Eve found Leah standing before an empty table at the diner, carefully placing a plate of gingerbread cookies beside a framed photograph of her father. Next to it sat the red medic cap, positioned as if its invisible wearer was joining the celebration. The diner, usually closed by evening on holidays, now glowed with warmth and activity. Every table was filled. Elderly veterans, struggling families, solitary travelers, all sharing a meal together. The Carson table, as it had become known, remained symbolically reserved each year. A young boy recently placed in foster care after losing his parents approached hesitantly. Leah smiled and gestured to the empty chair. Would you like to sit here? She asked gently. My father always said no one should eat alone on Christmas. The boy nodded, his eyes wide as he studied the photograph in the curious red cap. Was he a soldier? The boy asked. He was a healer, Leah replied. Someone who helped people when they needed it most. As the evening progressed, Leah moved between tables, ensuring everyone felt welcome. She paused when the door chimed and Mercer entered, nodding respectfully in her direction. He handed her an envelope. Inside was a brief message in familiar handwriting. The circle continues. Well done, Leah understood immediately. Somewhere in the crowd, perhaps Mason himself was watching, or perhaps one of his associates. The details didn't matter. What mattered was the unbroken chain of kindness, extending now to a new generation. As Leah looked around at the faces gathered in the warm glow of the diner, she understood something deeper. Kindness doesn't ask for an audience, but sometimes the quietest acts are those that echo through generations. Her father had saved a life, but the legacy of that night had gone on to save many more. Some gifts don't come wrapped in paper, yet they carry the value of an entire lifetime. And sometimes a simple meal offered at just the right moment becomes the key that unlocks a debt of gratitude, dormant for decades. As snow fell softly outside the windows, Leah watched the gathering of strangers becoming something more. A community, however temporary, bound together by shared humanity in the simple acknowledgement that no one should face darkness alone. Her father would have approved. Have you ever done something small that created a ripple effect? Share your story, because kindness just needs the right person at the right time. Subscribe for more incredible stories, where we remember that what's right, however small, is always worth remembering.